Welcome to the show, and this is Brother Michael Imhotep. Greetings, brother.
Hey, Sister Doriel, thanks for having me back. How you doing today?
I am very blessed to be sitting down in my own chair.
Okay. All right. Good. Good.
So we are here for another chat. I'm very thankful, and for the record, Brother Michael Imhotep. The first time I asked Brother Michael would he come, this time he said, "Doriel, I think I'd like to come on." I just had to say that. I just had to say.
Oh yeah.
I saw that message. I was like, "Is he asking me?" Okay, good.
Right.
So let's get into it. So today we have you asked to engage in a conversation that is very hot on the presses during this current week. This is Thursday, and I would like to acknowledge for the record, Brother Michael, and let me be clear, are you wearing black? Is that suit black?
Yeah, it's pinstripe. It's black pinstripe. Yeah.
So for the record, this is Thursday. I have to put this little segue in. This is Thursday, and so this is Thursdays in Black, even though this is not the regular platform that I talk about that on. It is the day that ecumenicals and other loved ones across the world, advocates and activists, celebrate the eradication of gender-based violence. And so we actually show up in Black across the world. And so you just happen to have, but you was probably just listening to, the ancestors say that gender-based violence is wrong, and we will do what we can at all costs, to eradicate it. So thank you very much.
Right. No, I'm against gender-based violence, and it's perpetuated in the society where you have white male patriarchy. And unfortunately, oftentimes in our media and negative corporate controlled hip hop, we see white male patriarchy infused. It can be dressed in FUBU. It can be dressed up in red, black, and green with the dashiki. Okay. It can be, it could be a dashiki and an ankh. It can be dressed up in a minister's robe with the collar. Okay. So we see it manifest itself. This is one of the problems with the civil rights movement. There was sexism in the civil rights movement. This is why Ella Baker left the Southern Christian Leadership Conference after she was passed over for a permanent leadership position. And she helped co-found SCLC in 1957 with Dr. King and others. And Dr. King, this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness, but Dr. King was a sexist. Okay. He did not believe that women belonged in permanent leadership positions. William Monroe Trotter, who was a great man who was with the Afro-American Council, who helped co-found the Niagara movement in 1905 with Dr. W.B. Du Bois. William Monroe Trotter was a sexist. He did not believe that women belonged in these organizations. So I think he and Ida B. Wells butted head, because Ida B. Wells was in the Niagara movement as well. And she went on to be a co-founder of the NAACP in 1909.
So, and I would actually love to have a separate conversation about that, because that's an entire history lesson. But I know you shared this and a lot of similar information and studies, and with some people south of where I am in New York and south of where you are in Detroit are thinking that it's not appropriate. But let's talk about it on another conversation, because this is a hot topic for today. And I would love for you to introduce it, and let's get into this.
Okay, so the main topic I wanted to deal with, I dealt with this on my show Sunday night, and is dealing with the 4-count indictment against Donald Trump. This is dealing with the January 6th probe, okay? And this is extremely important, because here you had an attempt from a sitting president to overthrow the government, stay in power, interrupt a bicameral, that means both chambers, House Representatives and U.S. Senate, a bicameral session of Congress that is mandated by the U.S. Constitution to certify the Electoral College votes. And he did this with the purpose of staying in power, okay, to prevent the peaceful transference of power from one president to another. And one of the 4 counts that he is accused of violating by Special Counsel Jack Smith is the Section 241 of U.S. Penal Code, U.S. Criminal Code, which is the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. and the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 was it came about during the Reconstruction Era, and it was designed to crack down on violence perpetuated against African Americans who were trying to vote, African American elected officials, and white Republicans and white Republican elected officials, and interfering with their official duty, inflicting violence upon them, killing them, etc. Okay, so it's poetic justice that a white supremacist like Donald Trump is being charged, not with just trying to overthrow the government. And we'll go through and look at the charges. I'm going to show you some of the pages from the actual indictment, because I have the actual 45-page indictment here, and we have the PDF version of it as well from the New York Times. It's poetic justice that someone who tried to overthrow, invalidate votes coming from 7 states, okay, including Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, etc. This would ultimately invalidate 16.9 million African Americans' votes, because 16.9 million African Americans voted for Donald Trump. And this plays into a history of fighting, having political violence in this country, and trying to suppress the votes of African Americans and trying to suppress the political power of African Americans, especially after slavery ends during the Reconstruction Era, which is 1865 to 1877, and then going into the Jim Crow era after that, when we have the state legislatures, especially in the South, rewriting their state constitutions to impose poll taxes, literacy tests, property ownership requirements, a grandfather clause, which stated that if your grandfather could not vote prior to 1867, then you can't vote. And these were all ways to try to get around the 15th Amendment of 1870. Okay, so the South has continuously fought back in different ways, especially against advancements that African Americans have been making over the past decades. After chattel slavery ends in 1865, when Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment, December 6, 1865. And the big lie that Donald Trump pushed, that the election was stolen, and that Special Counsel Jack Smith is charging Donald Trump with conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government. This is a continuation of an attack on African American political power. And this was the attacks that we saw in the attempt to overthrow, to invalidate these votes. There was a racist backlash against African Americans voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, 1, but 2, the January 5th, 2020 special election in Georgia, where you saw Senator Raphael Warnock be reelected again and defeat Kelly Loeffler, and you saw John Ossoff, the Jewish candidate, Jewish American candidate, he won as well, the 2 Democrats. Okay, this added fuel to the fire, and we saw white supremacists strike back on January 6, 2021, with the January 6, 2021 insurrection, which was spurred and inspired by Donald John Trump, who is the sole defendant in this case.
Okay, so that sounds like the abstract. Mm-hmm. So there are 3. I just had it open. There are three enforcement acts.
Well, actually 4. There are actually 4 enforcement acts. If you want to, let's look at the we can look at what the enforcement acts are first, and is, let's see here, I have a slide here. Okay, can I do the screen share? let me see something here. Let's go here. I'm going to do the screen share.
Okay, let me pull us to the side.
Okay, it says present, share screen. Share screen to share screen works best with share screen. I want to share screen, and I want to share the PowerPoint slide right here. Okay, this is the PowerPoint slide.
Okay,
should
got
come
it.
up. Okay, yeah, PowerPoint slide. Okay, now this comes from Britannica.com, Encyclopedia Britannica. This comes from the Britannica.com, their website with their online encyclopedia. What were the force acts during Reconstruction? So Reconstruction is 1865 to 1877, the period right after the Civil War ends. Force acts in U.S. history, they were a series of 4 acts passed by Republican Reconstruction supporters in the Congress between May 31st, 1870 and March 1st, 1875 to protect the constitutional rights guaranteed to African Americans or blacks by the 14th and 15th Amendments. 14th Amendment of 1868, which guaranteed citizenship rights. 15th Amendment, which guaranteed the right to vote to African American men. 15th Amendment of 1870. The major provisions of the acts authorize federal authorities to enforce penalties upon anyone interfering with the registration, voting, office holding, or jury service of blacks, provided for federal election supervisors, and empowered the President of the United States to use military forces to make summary arrests. Under the Act of April 20th, 1871. So Congress passed the Ku Klux Klan Act April 20th of 1871, and it's signed into law by President Ulysses S. Grant. Under the Act of April 20th, 1871, 9 South Carolina counties were placed under martial law in October of 1871 by President Ulysses S. Grant using the Ku Klux Klan Act. This act and earlier statutes resulted in more than 5,000 indictments and 1,250 convictions throughout the South. He declared martial law on 9 counties in South Carolina in October of 1871 to crack down on Ku Klux Klan violence. Okay. Keep in mind, South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, December 20th, 1860. And South Carolina is where the Civil War started, April 12th, 1861, with the attack on Fort Sumter, which was a military stronghold, a military armory. In subsequent Supreme Court decisions, various sections of the force acts were declared unconstitutional, but it's still on the books, is still intact, okay, and is being used to charge Donald Trump with crimes also. And then, so you have this reference, so people can check this out. This is under Force Acts, F-O-R-C-E, Force Acts at Britannica.com. And then another a good source for this as well is from history.house.gov. And let me take this one out.
And actually, I found the same in Senate.gov, which is where I found mine. And it just stated the enforcement acts of 1870 and 1871.
Right. Okay. And then
I'll add that to the comments.
Okay. And then we have I want to share it's a website I wanted to share. StreamYard broadcast, which is
right. And as you're making these references to the force acts, let's keep in context of how the former leader violated. Okay, so I'm just gonna post this link, see if you can share it. I can't share it on my end. Okay. I can't find it. This link right here. This is to history.house.gov. History.house.gov is the history section of the U.S. House of Representatives. This article is the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, April 20th, 1871. It gives you background historical information on that. And then the last paragraph talks about
President Ulysses S. Grant signs the bill, and then in October 1871, Grant used these powers in several South Carolina counties, demonstrating the willingness of the Republican-led federal government to take decisive action to protect the civil and political rights of the free people during Reconstruction. Okay, so you can read that now, and then also I'm going to get into some of the history of the U.S. Department of Justice, because the Department of Justice was created in 1870 by Congress, largely to protect the new rights of African Americans. And what Jack Smith is doing right now, and prosecuting Donald Trump is in the tradition of why the U.S. Department of Justice was founded in the first place. A lot of people don't understand this history. U.S. Department of Justice was founded during Reconstruction in 1870, and they were founded largely to protect the new rights that African Americans were given, especially voting rights. And they were going prosecuting Ku Klux Klansmen, and other white domestic terrorists. Okay, now, if we look at, I want to look quickly here at this. Let's see, what can we pull up? I'm going to give you this article here. This gives a good synopsis. This is from NBCnews.com. Special counsel charges Trump with conspiracy to defraud the U.S. Because on my end, I can't, it's not letting me share the websites. Okay, but we got this one right here. This gives a good synopsis of it. And I wanted to, if you could pull it up on your end, that's fine, because we can go through his first couple of paragraphs to give us a synopsis of this. But I want to show the actual, indictment and look at the first 3 pages as well of the actual indictment here. And screen 1.
So the link that you just gave me of NBC News, is it says about the DOJ.
It says Donald Trump indicted January 6th grand jury 2020 election. That link.
Okay, I'll try it again.
From NBCnews.com. It's right there. Yeah. So, and okay, while you pull that up. So what happened was last Tuesday was August 1st. So last Tuesday, former President Donald Trump was indicted on charges that he conspired to defraud the country. He used the country he used to lead, and attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of presidential power to Joe Biden. The indictment from special counsel Jack Smith's office says, quote, the purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct the government function by which those results are collected, counted, and certified. End quote. Now, the indictment. Okay, the indictment marks a historic moment for a nation less than 250 years old. The first time a former president has faced criminal charges for trying to overturn the bedrock of democracy, a free and fair election. While Trump's failure to reverse his defeat was a credit to the guardrails of that democracy, the ability to prosecute him may renew the stress test on the constitutional design. The allegation that Trump used, quote, dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to subvert the 2020 election with, quote, pervasive and destabilizing lies and election fraud, end quote, comes after a sprawling investigation that included testimony from dozens of White House aides and advisors ranging in seniority up to former Vice President Mike Pence. All right. And most of the people who were interviewed, most of the people who are going to testify, most of the witnesses are Republicans. They're people who work for Trump. There's attorneys. There are people who worked in the Trump administration. Okay. So I know Trump likes to say this is a Democratic witch hunt. No, it's not, because like over 90% of the witnesses are Republicans. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's the article from NBCnews.com, so people can check that out also. All right, now
I'll put it in the comments.
Right, put in the comments. Okay, now when we look at this, I just want to look briefly here at the first 3 pages of the indictment, and then I want to go to this article that deals with Trump being charged with violating the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, because this is what's taking place right now is extremely important and is unprecedented, and we're in a 2024 presidential election cycle. And if we don't adequately understand what happened in 2020, okay, then we may make the wrong decision in 2024. We may not understand what's at stake in 2024. All right. Okay. So if we look here at, let's see, we've got, the actual indictment right here. Let me, because it's not letting me try to share this. So I'm going to post this link here. This is from New York Times. This is a PDF. See if you can pull that up and show that on the screen, because presentations. I don't think it'll let me share that. You see that link that I just posted there? Okay. We've got that. And then okay. Then if people have any questions as well, you can post your questions here also.
Remove that. Hold on, this is the other one.
Okay.
So this is special counsel charges Trump? Yes. No, full PDF.
Yeah, full PDF.
Got it. Do you see it?
Yeah, okay. Full PDF. Okay, so looking at page 1. So the counts are, so there are 4 counts. Count number 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States. We see that on the right, on my right hand side. Conspiracy to defraud the United States. Count number 2, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Count number 3, obstructions of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. That was the January 6th session of the House of Representatives and U.S. Senate to certify the electoral college votes. And then count number 4, 18 U.S.C. section 241, conspiracy against rights, conspiracies against rights. That deals with violating the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. So if we look here, it starts with indictment. The grand jury charges that all, and I think you could zoom in.
I'm trying to scroll down a little bit, but it's, let's see. Oh, I know what I have to do. Okay.
Control plus sign.
There we go.
Should let you zoom in. Yeah. And control plus sign should allow you to zoom in.
Got it.
And then, okay. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So the grand jury charges that at all times material to this indictment on or about the dates and at the approximate times stated below. So we have the introduction. The defendant, Donald John Trump, was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. The defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. Despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. Despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following election day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. Okay, that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false and the defendant knew that they were false, but the defendant repeated widely disseminated, the defendant repeated and widely disseminated them anyway. to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. Now, Trump is saying, and his attorneys are saying, well, he had a right to lie. He has a First Amendment right, things like this. This is addressed here on page 2 of the indictment.
Right.
The defendant, for number 3, okay, for number 3, yeah. The defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely, that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won.
Wait. Yeah. I gotta pause on that one.
Yeah.
We have the right to free speech. We have the right to present, whatever information we deem important. But ethics, and this is just elementary, ethics should wield on one's heart that the information that you are presenting, especially when it comes to the public domain and when it addresses the lives and the lives of many people and the economy that we stand on, it should be true.
Well, but ethics, it doesn't play a part here. Ethics don't always play a part in whether something's legal or not, whether it's ethical. It's clear. They're clearly stating that he has a right to lie, but what he does not have a right to do is conspire. That's the next. Let me continue. It goes on to say, it addresses it here. Okay. It says the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. The next sentence, he was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election, through lawful and appropriate means, which they did. There were 61 lawsuits filed,
Right.
All the lawsuits they lost or were thrown out except for one in Philadelphia, and that one dealt with how close poll watchers could be to people counting the vote. That was the only case that they won. The other 60 cases were thrown out or they lost. So he was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures. They did all of that. They had a recount with the cyber ninjas in Arizona. They challenged the results in Atlanta. They had recounts in certain cities that had higher African-American populations. They didn't have recounts I don't believe they had any recounts in counties that Trump won. It is only in counties where he lost or cities where he lost that had basically high African-American populations. It goes on to say, indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. So they had all these legal challenges and they came up empty. Over and over again in cases that were presided over by federal judges that Donald Trump appointed, they ruled against them because the evidence was not there to support the argument that things were fraudulent or that there were fraudulent votes or dead people were voting. In Georgia, Secretary of State Raffensperger, he said that there were 2 dead people who voted. Trump said there were 5,000. Raffensperger on the call that was recorded, he's saying there's no evidence of 5,000 dead people voting. We found 2, not 5,000. Now, Number 4, shortly after Election Day, the defendant pursued also unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. In so doing, the defendant perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies, because he's charged with three conspiracies, and that's laid out on page 1 of the indictment. Okay. A conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S.C. U.S. Criminal Code, 18 U.S.C. Section 371. So we have conspiracy to defraud the United States. Okay. B, second conspiracy, a conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at the U.S. Capitol building, in the House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. A conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified. This is the certification proceeding. This is mandated by the U.S. Constitution that this process takes place. This is in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1512K. And then the third conspiracy, a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted in violation of 18 U.S.C. 241, which is the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Okay, now it goes on to say, each of these conspiracies, which built on the widespread mistrust of the defendant, the defendant was creating through pervasive and destabilizing laws about election fraud, targeted a bedrock function of the United States federal government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election, which is the federal government function. Okay. All right. So we'll pause right there. So these are the charges. Okay. There are four counts, and this is what he's being charged with. Okay. All right. So I wanted to lay that out because a lot of people haven't looked at the actual indictment. They've read excerpts in articles, things like this. So I wanted to actually show you what the actual indictment says. And then the article that we showed from NBCnews.com, name of that article is Special Counsel charges Trump with conspiracy to defraud the U.S. The PDF of the 45 count indictment is in that article, so you can read it yourself. You can download it. Okay. Did you want to go to questions? Because then I want to get to the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871.
Okay, so let's see if there are comments from.
Well, if you had any questions.
So I actually do.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when it comes to I guess this would be B, the conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collective results of the presidential election are counted and certified.
Right.
The fact that it was done,
mm-hmm.
and this, again, may be very elementary. How is, of course, I don't know of, and are there any other pieces of evidence to show that someone prior to this, committed this level of conspiracy? How is it that with such evidence that the government has already found, that there's what's the next step? What's the next step? How is he to actually, pay for this in time, in, sentencing? And of course, how is
you have to have a trial first before you can get to sentencing. You have to have a trial and a verdict. So they've had a hearing. They filed charges. They've had a hearing. He was arraigned. they've had a hearing. He pleaded not guilty to all 4 charges. Now you have to have there was a protective order that Special Counsel Jack Smith wants, because they want to limit what Trump can say publicly about certain aspects of the evidence. They don't want Trump to mention, see, because of discovery, which means all the evidence that the prosecution has, they have to turn over to the defense team. Okay. They have to turn over to Trump's lawyers. They don't want Trump speaking publicly or posting on Truth Social names of witnesses, attacking witnesses, trying to intimidate witnesses, like he's already attacked Mike Pence, who is a witness. And Mike Pence is one of the strongest witnesses. He's already attacked the witness. He's already attacked Judge Tanya Chuckton, federal judge Tanya Chuckton, who was appointed by President Barack Obama in 2013. Okay, so yeah, okay, so you have this. So they haven't even set a date for the trial yet. Okay, so before we get to sentencing, you have to have a trial. All right, but go ahead.
Okay. So given this and given all the steps that are occurring, the former leader is still concerned with getting his seat back.
Right.
And even doing some campaigning from behind a secluded space.
You mean in prison? What do you mean behind a secluded space?
You said the word, I did not. Because it could be in a traditional location. It could be, as some have considered, maybe back at his place of residence.
Right. Yeah. He can still run for president from prison, because there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution as of yet that precludes someone or excludes someone from running for president if they are convicted of a felony. Okay, they just have to be 18 years old and a natural born. No, sorry, they have to be at least 35 years old and a natural born citizen of the United States. So they can be convicted of a felony and still run for president. They can run for president from prison. And actually, Eugene Debs, who was a candidate for president for the Socialist Party, Eugene Debs, in the early 1900s, he ran for president from prison.
Okay. As an educator, I'm always concerned about how this looks, how the rules that we teach to young people and to younger people are supposed to be universal, supposed to be, cover every single person. And the fact that we have a former leader who is clearly obstructing the laws that he, as the leader, is supposed to execute, is not being followed. And so it definitely turns the table of what just looks like for...
Well, that's why charges are filed against him, because he's not filing, because he's obstructing. That's why charges are filed against him. That's why charges are filed against him in the Mar-a-Lago case, dealing with classified documents. That's why Fonnie Willis next week is going to file charges in trying to overturn election results in Fulton County, Georgia. Okay, that's why these lawsuits. That's why these criminal cases are taking place. That's why he's being indicted on criminal charges. That's why he was indicted in Manhattan, because he's not following the rules. So keep in mind that while the 4 years he was president, based upon the memo from the Office of Legal Counsel for the Department of Justice, a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. Okay, so for those 4 years, he couldn't be prosecuted, at least criminally. He could, if I remember correctly, he could be sued in civil court, but not criminal charges. These are all criminal charges.
Okay. Let me just give a little reminder. So we are addressing, and this is our brother Michael Imhotep of the African History Network, who has lovingly decided to come and chat about this very dire situation with our former leader and the indictment of our former leader and the violation of the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act, and just trying to bring some critical conversations to our audiences. I'm very thankful that you decided to come on and address this in addition to your own show.
Right.
If you do not, right. If you go ahead.
Yeah, but it's important for people to understand that what fueled trying to overturn these election results is that African American people voted for Joe Biden. This is animosity towards African Americans voting and using our political power. This is the white backlash that is the result of this. Keep in mind. So we have to understand this chronology. Okay. Now it's interesting that all this is taking place within the first 2 weeks of August. Okay. Because he was indicted on August 1st, Tuesday. He was arraigned on August 4th, which was a Thursday. Okay. August 6th was the 58th anniversary of President Lyndon Johnson signing into law the 1965 Voting Rights Act. All right. That was August 6th. August 8th was the anniversary of President Richard Nixon announcing he was going to resign from office the next day at 12 noon because of the Watergate scandal and the Watergate investigation. Nixon was an idol of Donald Trump. Many presidential historians, legal scholars believe that if President Gerald Ford had not given Nixon a presidential pardon behind the Watergate scandal, and if Nixon had actually been put on trial in the Senate and removed from office, or if he had been put on if criminal charges were brought against Nixon, this would have served as a deterrence to Donald Trump. But Nixon resigned from office. He was not prosecuted criminally, and he was given a presidential pardon by Gerald Ford, which sets a bad precedent. Now, Gerald Ford did it to heal the nation. Okay. Here you have a domestic terrorist who needs to be prosecuted, who needs to be put in jail, who needs to be put in prison. He needs to be put in prison for the rest of his life. Here you have somebody who put people's lives in jeopardy. Here you have somebody who lied on Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the two African-American women who were poll workers in Georgia. And he put their lives in jeopardy. Rudy Giuliani put their lives in jeopardy, lying, saying that they were on camera passing a flash drive back and forth between the two of them, trying to load votes for Joe Biden. And Shay Moss was passing a ginger mint to her mother, Ruby Freeman. Okay. These people belong in prison for the rest of their lives. These people made Richard Nixon look like a Boy Scout. Because what happened was the reason why Richard Nixon resigned from office is because Republicans in the Senate went to the White House and they said, we've seen the evidence against you, and if this goes to trial in the Senate, you're going to be found guilty and you're going to be removed from office. They told him you should resign from office, and he did. Okay. Donald Trump doesn't have any integrity. Okay. He doesn't. And the only reason why he's running for president is to stay out of prison. Okay. So if he gets elected again, he's going to have his appointed attorney general to stop the investigation, drop the charges, not prosecute. And if he gets convicted, okay, prior to the election, he's going to try to give himself a presidential pardon. Now, it's not clear legally if a president can pardon himself because most legal scholars say that you need two parties for the presidential pardon. The president gives a pardon to someone else, but Trump could have his attorney general drop the charges against them. This is why he wants to delay the trial till after the November 2024 presidential election. But my thing is, well, wait a second. If you're claiming that you're innocent, why wouldn't you want the trial before the election so you can be exonerated? Why would you want to go through the presidential campaign with that trial hanging over your head? Why wouldn't you want to be exonerated and run on the fact that you were exonerated? Okay. Only if you're guilty do you want to drag this out to after the 2024 presidential election. You know, and then just very quickly here, then in the Mar-a-Lago case, now his attorneys want a SCIF at Mar-a-Lago to review classified documents. Now, a SCIF is a self-contained unit, right? So they have this at the U.S. Capitol building to review classified documents. You can't take cell phones in there. You can't take pictures of the classified documents, things like this, right? Well, why do you need a SCIF to review classified documents when Trump said he declassified all the documents?
Okay,
then there's attorneys are saying, well, they need time to get clearance, to get security clearances to review classified documents. But he said he declassified all the documents. So why you need security clearance?
So in this light of trying to declassify the documents and then asking for the SCIF in order to go review them, why is it continuing? That's what I don't understand. Why is it continuing if, in essence, if I'm saying this is red, but now I want to change it to blue, why aren't people just sort of catching him at that moment and saying, well, no, then you cannot continue to do this part? Like, that's what I don't understand.
Well, Judge Eileen Cannon will rule on that. That's the judge in Florida. She'll rule on that. But it doesn't, his legal team, first of all, they have the worst client in the world, because he keeps incriminating himself day after day. He won't shut up.
That's what I don't understand, why we're continuing to have this conversation. Like, why is it deliberating so long?
Why is what deliberating? It takes time to have the trial. They have to set the trial. Well, you know, they have to set the trial dates. They have to set trial dates, and they have to go through the process of discovery, turning over all the evidence to the defendants, to his attorneys, things like this.
Right, the evidence that has actually been released, like the evidence that he's actually allowing to be presented, or he.
What's happening is, like in the January 6th probe, Special Counsel Jack Smith wants limits on what he can actually release, talk about in public. They're not saying he can't talk about the case. They're talking about specific things in the case, like names of witnesses that have not been released. Okay, and intimidating witnesses on social media. Okay, attacking the judge on social media, attacking the federal judge, things like this, right? But let's do this. I want to go to this article. It's a good article that explains the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871.
So is that what you put in the chat? No.
Yeah, it's from the Washington Post. Yeah.
Oh, Trump Indictment, Civil Rights Law.
Yeah, that one from the Washington Post. Let's go through this here. Okay, so while you pull that up, okay, so while you go through that, I just want to give this background information. This is dealing with history. Okay, so we were talking about the backlash of January 6, 2021 insurrection, right? And I was talking about President Lyndon Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act into law in August 6, 1965. So a lot of people say, why do you need a Voting Rights Act? Why do we still need a Voting Rights Act? Things like this, right? The reason why you needed a 1965 Voting Rights Act is to strike down the poll taxes, the literacy test, grandfather clauses, the impediments, the obstructions to the 15th Amendment of 1870, which guaranteed the right to vote to African American men, and then the 19th Amendment in 1920, which guaranteed the right to vote for women. Okay, when you go back and look at the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, all right, and I posted this link here. This is from history.com. Now I teach a lot of this in my online classes. I teach on Saturdays and Sundays, my history classes. But this article here, how Jim Crow era laws suppressed the African American vote for generations. This gives a good synopsis and a chronology of this history. Okay, so you had the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, and keep in mind, during Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877, about 2,000 African-American men got elected to office. They got elected to local office, state legislature. In South Carolina, the majority of the state legislature in South Carolina was made up of African-American men. Okay, we've been going this long. Okay, okay, it's made up of African-American men. So, and you had a resentment from white Southerners who resented having to live by laws that former slaves were voting on and former slaves were writing in the law, and former slaves being in the state legislature, being in the U.S. House of Representatives, in a couple of cases being in the U.S. Senate, starting with Hiram Rhodes Revels from Mississippi in 1870, who was a U.S. Senator, African-American man. Okay, so you have the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, where these white supremacists in the state legislature rewrite the state constitution to impose poll taxes and literacy tests.
Right.
Okay, to suppress the African-American vote in a state that had, in the majority of the population was made up of African-Americans. They also imposed a felony disenfranchisement law. That's section 241. Okay, felony disenfranchisement law in section 241 is still law in the state of Mississippi. What they did was it was 9 types of crimes that were felonies, and if you were convicted of these felonies, you lost your right to vote, and they were targeting African Americans. In June of 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear a challenge from Mississippi challenging section 241, okay, of the Mississippi State Constitution that was put in the law in 1890. So when we go through and study these laws and study this history, we see how these laws are still negatively impacting African Americans today. So you have like black conservatives that say, oh, slavery was a long time ago. Reconstruction was a long time ago. Jim Crow era. You have equality now. You got LeBron James, and you got Will Smith, and you got billionaires and things like this. Jay-Z, you have equality now. No, we're still feeling the effects of this Jim Crow era, and these laws are still on the books. There was a okay, so we have that, and then actually, if you pull up that article here,
which one do you want?
The history.com, the last one that I just posted.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, because it goes through, it shows you the Mississippi State Convention. Now, what happened was, Solomon Saladin Calhoun, who was the White County judge who presided over the Mississippi State Convention of 1890, he said, we came here to exclude the Negro. Okay. Nothing short of this were answered. When asked why they were there, he said, we came here to exclude the Negro. That was the purpose of it. So what they did in Mississippi became copied by other southern states. Okay. And you can scroll down. It talks about the Mississippi State Convention. South Carolina in 1895, Louisiana in 1898. Louisiana imposes the grandfather clause. You have Alabama 1901. If you look at the Encyclopedia of Alabama, where they talk about the Alabama State Constitution, they tell you that the Alabama State Constitution was written in 1901 to codify white supremacy. Okay. Right. You have Oklahoma, it's Georgia, etc. Okay. So they're trying to take back full control of local government and state government and lock African Americans out of political power. When you go look at Florida, 1868, when Florida writes their state constitution, they create a felony disenfranchisement law. They write this into the state constitution, targeting African Americans, and you would lose your right to vote for life if you were convicted of a felony in the state of Florida. They did this, they said, because they were trying to prevent a Negro legislature. They were trying to prevent a Negro legislature, and African Americans were 48% of the population of the state of Florida in 1868, 3 years after chattel slavery ends. This was a result of slavery. They feared our political power. Okay. And this is why,
Hi, I just want to put this, I want to show this particular link. Now, Actually, some of my camels, y'all know who you are actually watching, and some of them are actually like government poli-sci folks, and so
Okay.
this information is familiar, to people. It's not necessarily familiar to a lot, and so
Right.
I'm actually putting the history.com, the Jim Crow laws, Black Vote link up. It's in the chat and it's also here, and so if people want to actually refer back to it, please do so. I'm also going to pop back up the Washington.
Okay, here are the comments. Because I was looking at the private chat, I wasn't looking at the comments. Okay, now I'm looking at the comments. How's everybody doing? Okay.
The Trump Indictment, civil rights law, there as well. So if
Washington
people,
Post.
Right. If people, Washington Post. If people are familiar with this information, great. If you can roll it off the top of your head, great. For those people who don't, that's actually why I'm really trying to do these shows and the segment. This is called it's really Politician and the People, because I wanted to have conversations or critical conversations or some discourse around what is happening around us, what is happening to us, what is happening right in front of our face, what is happening in terms of red zoning, in terms of what's happening with voter rights and that being like rescinded, what's happening with health issues and healthcare and how that's being taken right from us. And so I wanted to just have another moment. My goal for this show is, as best as possible, usually my shows are on Monday night, but when people think about wanting to watch on Monday night, just to sort of take a pause and say, hey, what's happening over here in Doriel's show? What is she talking about? What things are we going to actually learn? Who is in the know that we should be paying attention to? And so just before we start to do the decline or the wrap up, I just wanted to remind people of that. And so thank you to those who are watching. Please share this out. If you haven't been following the news, I was speaking to a really prolific brother of mine last night. He's like, hey, I really haven't been sort of in tune with what's been happening over the past couple of weeks. But of course, this is on everyone's mind. But just engaging in some matters that are not just pop culture. Of course, we can talk about, and we really didn't talk about what happened in Montgomery during this conversation, though we alluded to it. But, the fact that we're going through this now is because there are certain things that have not been resolved, we have not moved on. We may have moved forward, but there are still things that
we can talk about Montgomery, Alabama, but you got the people act like this is the first time African Americans fought back, that means you don't understand history. This is why, I did a post dealing with this. You have to read this book right here. This nonviolent stuff will get you killed, how guns made the civil rights movement possible. The civil rights movement was not a nonviolent movement. One of my teachers, Professor James Small, told me personally, if it had not been for African Americans with guns, there would not have been a civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was not a nonviolent movement. You have civil rights superstars out here telling the revisionist history because they get paid to do that. It was African Americans with guns who were protecting the civil rights workers. This was written by Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., who was a field secretary for SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, for 5 years, working in rural Mississippi to organize African Americans to register to vote, okay, and to get them to vote. Now, if you know anything about the history of Mississippi, you know that's very dangerous work. And I mean, that's where Philadelphia, Mississippi is where Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney were killed June 21st, 1964. Money, Mississippi is where Emmett Till was killed August 28th, 1955. Okay. Vicksburg, Mississippi is where you had the Vicksburg Massacre, 1874. And that was over African Americans backing a black sheriff who white people who removed from office, a duly elected black sheriff in Vicksburg, Mississippi in 1874. Peter Crosby, he gets removed from office by white people. There's been a fight over political power along racial lines in this country going back to after slavery ended. There's been a bloody fight over this. Okay, you have to ask the question. Well, if the U.S. economy is about $25 trillion. And the white portion of the U.S. economy is something probably between 12 to 15 trillion or a little more than that. OK, and if they have a 6-3 conservative majority on the U.S. Senate, in the U.S. Supreme Court, Donald Trump got 226 federal judges confirmed, and those are all lifetime appointments. Why do they care about black people voting if they control so much? because they understand that politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, the adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And if they realize if the right people get voted into office, laws can be passed that they deem detrimental to their existence. This is about the fear of the browning of America, and the fear that by the year 2043, white people will no longer be the majority population in this country. So they want to control the courts, because the judicial branch of the federal government interprets law from the legislative branch of the federal government, and interprets policies and executive orders from the executive branch of the federal government. So it's Trump's 6-3 conservative majority Supreme Court that strikes down President Biden's executive order on student loan forgiveness, right, which would have been greatly beneficial to African Americans. It would have moved 500,000 African American families from a negative net worth to a positive net worth. Right. Okay. For the average African American, it would have wiped out about 50% of our student loan debt. And for a little more than 25%, it would have wiped out all of our student loan debt. Now, it would have helped millions of white people also, but it was greatly beneficial to us. When Biden added in, if you also got a Pell Grant, you can get up to $20,000 forgiven. And about 72% of African Americans go to college partly on Pell Grants. That's greatly beneficial to us. So then you have Republicans striking back. You just had the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court strike down affirmative action when it comes to college admissions.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And this is something they've been trying to do since affirmative action became a law in 65, Executive Order 11246 from President Lyndon Johnson. All right. So when you understand this history, see that there's always a backlash against periods of perceived progress that African Americans make. And this is how Nixon got elected in 68, as a backlash to the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the rebellions that were taking place across the country, Detroit, 1967, different things like this, the rebellions taking place across the country. Donald Trump was a backlash to 2 terms of President Barack Obama. Trump ran on the platform of law and order, which was the throwback to the platform Richard Nixon ran on in 1968. Law and order means protect white people and lock up African Americans. So if we understood Nixon in 68, we would have stopped Trump in 2016, because Donald Trump won Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by 78,000 votes. We had the votes to stop him. Jill Stein got 50,000 votes out of Michigan. Donald Trump won Michigan by 10,704 votes. Go ahead.
So as we look at what's happening with who's up, meaning like who's on deck, right? There was no connection to what happened this past week, but who's on deck, meaning who's going to be running. We have Brother Cornel West, who's going to be putting his hat into the ring, and whose voice we're going to be listening to, whose agendas we're going to be focusing on, how the former leader and our current leader are going to sort of be back at it. The new parties that will be brought to the forefront, because some people are not running on necessarily the Democratic or the Republican Party. There are still people, there are still newcomers. I'm not going to use the phrases that are, rolling around, but there are still newcomers who are looking for a place to sleep. There are still
there's still newcomers looking for a place to sleep. Okay.
Meaning
that's interesting. Okay.
Meaning immigrants who are coming in, and I'm in New York.
Okay.
I'm trying to be tactful here, right?
Okay. So let me put it to you like this. I'm a researcher and a historian. I deal with facts and evidence. Proper documentation ends all conversation. So how many electoral college votes does it take to become president-elect?
On vacation.
Say again?
I said I'm on vacation.
Oh, I'm asking you. You're the host. You brought this up. It takes 270 electoral college votes to become president-elect. Okay? If you ain't going to get 270, then what are you talking about? If you're not going to get close to 270. Cornel West is not going to win one state. Cornel West is not going to win one electoral college vote.
So why do you think he's in there? Why do you think he's...
Because his ego. His ego. Cornel West campaigned for Jill Stein. Are you serious?
Come on,
Jill Stein, who was sitting across from Vladimir Putin at the 10th anniversary of Russia Today.
I'm putting it out there.
What is that, December 2015? Who was sitting right next to Vladimir Putin? Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who then went on to become Donald Trump's first National Security Council advisor for like, what, 27 days?
I'm calling it out. Dr. Cornel West, if you see this, if someone passes this on to you, please come on over. We just want to hear from you. We really do.
I talked to him on Roland Martin and Filter before. This was months before he announced he was running, because I was asking him about comments he made about the great Grandmaster Scholar, Dr. John Henry Clark. And I remember when Cornel West tried to debate Dr. Clark in 1993, 94. I got the video. I have it on DVD. I remember when it happened, because that came about because of a disagreement they had at the NAACP Leadership Summit, which was broadcasted on television. Farrakhan was there, Jesse Jackson, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Cornel West. It was convened by Ben Chavis.
I was new to the scene at that moment. Okay.
I'm 52. I remember when it happened. I saw it live. Okay. So yeah, whatever. Okay, but here, this is what we do. Now, post this, show this to your people.
Okay.
Okay.
Which one?
And my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Waka Kamane. All right. But this is simple math. If you ain't gonna get got it. Post that link. If you ain't gonna get 270 electoral college votes, then why are you running? This ain't the time to run for symbolism. Because if you ain't gonna beat Trump, then what are you doing? Jill Stein helped Trump win. I don't know how many people want to be honest and tell you that. If you look at the 3 swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Jill Stein's margin of victory was greater than the number of votes that put Trump over the top in those three states. Jill Stein helped Donald Trump win. So if you campaign for Jill Stein, why?
What are we doing, right?
Jill Stein was polling at 4% in national polls. She didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning. So why'd you stay in the race to the end?
Here we go. You see it?
Yeah. Now, if people do something as simple as Google, how have the policies of the Biden-Harris administration helped African Americans? Most likely the first hit that will come up is this 36-page document right here from whitehouse.gov, this fact sheet. It's entitled, "The Biden-Harris Administration Advances Equity and Opportunity for Black Americans and Communities Across the Country." It takes you through step by step, category by category, where you talk about the American Rescue Plan, the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that no Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that only 19 Republicans in the Senate and 14 Republicans in the House of Representatives voted for, whether it talks about the Inflation Reduction Act that no Republicans voted for, whether it talks about the CHIPS Act. It goes through category by category. The $5.8 billion that HBCUs got in 2021, which is a record amount of funding, relief to farmers, everything. It takes you through step by step. So you don't have to guess. You don't have to listen to conspiracy theorists and all this stuff. It takes you through and shows you how these policies coming from the Biden-Harris administration are helping the African American community. Now, overwhelmingly, these policies Republicans voted against or they are against. And if they get into the White House, they'll reverse this. And if you look at what the House of Representatives is doing, no meaningful bills are passing out of the House with these crazy coup plotters in control of the House of Representatives, led by Kevin McCarthy. And it took him 15 rounds to become Speaker of the House of Representatives. That's how weak he is. That's how weak of a leader he is. Okay. So now you go compare this to what anybody else who's running for president is talking about. You go compare this. And then the other thing that you do is go to congress.gov, because at congress.gov, you can read all these bills. And not only can you read these bills, and if you don't have time to read all the bills, just read the summary of the bill. They usually have a one-page summary of the bills. Okay. Most importantly, at congress.gov, you can see how your member of the House of Representatives and your 2 U.S. senators voted on these bills. If you're a member of the House of Representatives and your 2 U.S. senators overwhelmingly keep voting for bills that you advocate for and agree with, why the hell would you let them get voted out of office? Like, if you don't like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, but you don't live in West Virginia or Arizona, you can't vote them out of office. So why would you let your 2 members of the House or your 2 members of the Senate and House get voted out of office and they consistently vote for bills that you advocate for because you don't show up because you don't like these 2 idiots over here? So we have to understand political pressure points. We have to understand political pressure points. We also have to understand a concept that I teach called political self-defense. And political self-defense deals with understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans and understanding whose policies are most beneficial for African Americans, whose policies will do the least amount of harm, whose policies are the most realistic to be actually coming to fruition. Because there's a whole lot of people saying all type of nonsense. We're going to get you reparations. Oh, really? What's your legal argument for reparations? Because I read the U.S. Constitution. I've been studying history for 31 years. I'm still trying to find the law that states that slaves are supposed to be paid. So if you're trying to say you're going to get reparations and chattel slavery ended about 155 years ago, and the last of the former slaves out in the 1950s. And if you're saying you're going to get reparations, cash payments from the federal government, because our ancestors worked for 246 years largely for free and didn't get paid. So you're going to get cash payments from the federal government. Like, what law are you enforcing? Because I read the U.S. Constitution is not there. I'm still trying to find the law that states that slaves were supposed to be paid, because the whole purpose was not to pay them. Now, slavery was sanctioned by the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787, which unfortunately most people don't understand. Article 4, Section 2 laid the foundation for the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 and 1850. Okay. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 is why the international transatlantic slave trade was abolished in 1807, March 2nd, 1807. The Congress passes the law to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade. It tells you there, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, the earliest that the international transatlantic slave trade could be abolished is 1808. So that law goes into effect January 1st, 1808. It also tells you that a $10 tax would be placed on every African brought into the country after the international transatlantic slave trade was abolished. The law goes into effect January 1st, 1808, which means all of the Africans that were brought to this country from January 1st, 1808 through July of 1860, when the Clotilda comes into Alabama, all that was illegal based upon federal law in their court cases to back up your legal argument. One of your strongest court cases is the United States versus the Amistad 1841 U.S. Supreme Court case. And the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal for the Amistad slave ship to come into U.S. waters with Joseph St. Q and the rest of those Africans from Sierra Leone, because the international transatlantic slave trade was abolished. They ruled that it was illegal for them to be captured in the first place because there were international treaties that different European nations entered into that abolished the international transatlantic slave trade. And they ruled that those Africans had the right to take up arms on the ship, have a mutiny, and fight for their freedom. They ruled that those Africans were never slaves, and they granted them their freedom because the international transatlantic slave trade was abolished because it was mandated in the U.S. Constitution. Now, that's the foundation of a legal argument for reparations.
Okay, but so one thing that you said at the top of this piece is that there was a 10% what?
$10.
Sorry, a $10 what?
Tax. So
the $10 tax.
It's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution.
Okay, so what happens to that cumulative buildup of that $10 tax per person from 1808 until 18 whatever that is?
Nothing, because most people don't know it exists, so they ain't doing anything. They're talking about HR 40. They're talking about getting a study done for reparations. They don't. This is what I'm saying. Look, this is why a lot of stuff done on reparation you don't see me involved in, because That and the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866, which is in the treaty, and Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution tells you that treaties are the supreme law of the land. It tells you that the U.S. Constitution, all the previous treaties and all the subsequent treaties are the supreme law of the land. Okay, the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866. Some of our ancestors actually got land. They got membership in the Native American nations of the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. They got cash, things like this. They got some type of restitution. All right. They were illegally pushed out of those treaties starting about 1941 when the U.S. government conspires with what are known as the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans to redefine what a Native American is. And they stated that you had to have 1/4 or 1 quantum Native American blood. While all these people out here talking about cut the check are not talking about enforcing the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866. Now, Demario Solomon Simmons, who's Muskogee Creek, we're on Roland Martin and Filter together sometimes, and he's the attorney for the 3 survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Okay, because Tulsa, Oklahoma, was founded by Creek Indians around 1834. Right. When they get pushed off their land in the Southeast United States in the 1830s because of the Indian Removal Act signed by President Andrew Jackson, and the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians are pushed on what's known as the Trail of Tears, over 1,000 miles. They're all going to Oklahoma. They take their African slaves with them. About a third of the people on the Trail of Tears were African people. Okay. Tulsa comes from the Creek Indian word Tallahassee. All right. Now, a lot of the early African-American landowners in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in what would be the Greenwood district, which was across it was North Tulsa. It was across the railroad track. A lot of those early African-American landowners got land from those Black Freedmen Indian treaties. This forms the foundation of what we call Black Wall Street. But since we don't understand history, don't understand law, we up here talking about getting a study done for reparations. If you want to study, use the 1,000-page study that the California Reparations Task Force just released and look at their approximately 110 recommendations and start crafting policy around that at the city, state, and federal level. You don't need another study. Okay? You don't need another study. I was on last November 2022, early November. I was on I'm gonna show you something. I know you want to wrap up, sister, but I want to show this is important because I hear so many people talking about reparations, and 99% of these strategies out here ain't gonna work. Okay, and it's not based upon law at all. Go ahead.
Right, I'm actually just posting in the chat. I'm also gonna put it up. The Oklahoma. I went to oklahomahistory.org publication, and this article is on the Greenwood district, because your brain, it works a mile a minute, and so you're always dropping some amazing gems. And I just want people to be able to like see it and at least go back to it in real time. So I'm putting
Well, I got some better. Now, all of them people, I want you to understand. Go to my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and register for my online history classes. Please, because we get deep into all this information in my online history classes. But this article right here from history.com, the official website of the History Channel. Now, white people are telling us this, okay? Now, this is called 9 Entrepreneurs Who Helped Build Tulsa's Black Wall Street, okay? Now, I'm going to put this in the private chat. I want you to pull this article up, show it on the screen, because I want to show you something here. This gets into, they quote Hannibal B. Johnson, okay? Hannibal B. Johnson, he and I are Facebook friends. We've talked through Facebook. He's one of the top authorities on the history of Black Wall Street and the history of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hannibal B. Johnson wrote this book right here, Black Wall Street, From Riot to Renaissance in Tulsa's Historic Greenwood District. This was one of the first books that dealt with the real history of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Fantastic book, okay? Because I'm in a documentary that was done years ago dealing with Black Wall Street, and I've done a 2.5-hour lecture on that. That was one of my sources for it. Okay, now if you pull up this, I posted that article. You see it there? Pull up that article on the screen share so everybody can see that. Okay, now Hannibal B. Johnson is quoted in this article. I want you to scroll down to okay, it says the paragraph before the Greenwood District was established. Okay, and I want you to blow that up. This is why understanding history.
Wrong one.
No, put it in the browser. Don't Google it.
I know.
Yeah.
Got it. One moment. Let me just get it back from the private chat.
And then also, now, while you bring that up, so early November 2022, I was on a panel discussion. I was speaking at a virtual conference for the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, their second annual virtual equity summit. And a sister named Marnice Chris Jackson, who's a sister of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. I'm a Sigma, and she's the co-director. What'd you say?
I said you're soror.
Yeah, and she's a co-director of the organization. She invited me to be on the panel. So I was on the panel. There was about 7 of us. There were Native Americans and African Americans on the panel, and we were dealing with how we have a shared experience when it comes for like fighting for reparations, getting treaties enforced, things of this nature. But on the panel, the Native Americans, they were talking about getting treaties enforced. And the African Americans were talking about getting a study done, and most of the African Americans, HR 40. Now I wasn't talking about getting HR 40 done. I was talking about enforcing the Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866, because these are treaties that are still being enforced for the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. They still get free land, they get free taxes, college tuition, free radio station licenses, TV station licenses. They're still getting benefits from these treaties. Okay. Now, but most of our people don't know this exists. We're up here trying to get a study done. All right. Now, if you scroll down, go scroll down to the paragraph that starts with before the Greenwood District was established. Okay. It's like the second paragraph. Okay. Now I want to show you something. Okay. So blow this up. Control plus sign to zoom in. You zoomed. Okay. Control plus sign. You can zoom in some more. Control plus sign to zoom in. Okay. All right. Now, before the Greenwood District was established, African Americans came to Oklahoma in the mid-19th century as slaves of the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans. The term used for the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole Native American tribes, who were forced from their lands in the southeast part of the country, of the United States, resettling in Oklahoma, then known as Indian Territory. After the Civil War, which ends in 1865, under the terms of the treaties of 1866, these African Americans were emancipated, with some integrating into the tribes, a relationship that would later provide freedmen, with the Black freedmen, the former slaves, the freedmen, with their own land. Because we didn't keep calling ourselves slaves after slavery ended, which is why this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. I don't know why people are calling themselves descendants of slaves, because the slaves were freed. They didn't keep calling themselves slaves after slavery ended. They call themselves freedmen, former slaves, Black freedmen, ex-slaves. So why do we call ourselves, some of us, I don't, why do some of us call ourselves descendants of slaves? Why do some of us try to put our ancestors back into a classification that they took up arms to fight to free themselves from, and they didn't keep calling themselves that after slavery ended?
So, okay, but do you think it's as a result of this information is not so widely known, and so people are only going to what is comfortable? They're only going to they think there's there would be monetary compensation by calling themselves descendants of slaves. Okay. Next paragraph, quote, the relative wealth of some Black folks in Oklahoma comes in part through their connection to the tribes and their land ownership, end quote, says Hannibal B. Johnson, historian and author of Black Wall Street 100, An American City Grapples with Its Historical Racial Trauma. So that was his new book that came out in 2021, that 100th commemoration of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. That was his new book that came out. Okay, the book I just showed you was his first book dealing with the real history of Black Wall Street. This article goes on to say, the Dawes Act of 1887, this was the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, which redistributed 138 million acres of land, and most of it was supposed to go to
Native Americans and Black Indians, but white people end up getting 2/3 of that land. This is where the term $5 Indian comes from. Okay. Okay. The Dawes Allotment Act of 1887 authorized the government to divide tribal territories into allotments for individual Native Americans, which included black members.
Okay.
As word spread that Indian Territory was a safe place for African Americans to settle between 1865 and 1920, more than 50 black townships were founded in Oklahoma. Okay. So when we look at the success of Black Wall Street, we see the origins of it going back to land that African Americans got from the Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866. Those treaties are still on the books. But since we don't understand history and law, we're out here trying to get a damn study done as opposed to enforcing laws that are on the books.
So I'm gonna ask you now. We've had like three major conversations. The violation of the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act, the indictment of the former leader, and what might be happening, and now this situation, just talking about Tulsa in terms of uprising, because Black people are standing, which is connected, because Black people are standing up for their own particular rights.
Well, we've always done that. We have a history. We've always done that.
Right. So you gave us like a bonus. Like this is considered a bonus conversation. What is the specific sort of class or course that you teach, particularly on this topic right here, so that folks who are interested in just delving into that can go into, because the indictment of the former leader is going to be talked about ad infinitum over the past.
Well, I teach two classes. My Saturday class and my website is theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. So you can go there, you can register for the classes. And we do the sessions live Saturdays and Sundays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then the sessions are archived. So you can go back and watch them anytime, even after the course is over with. Saturdays, I teach ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach in school. You can actually bring up the website on the screen share and so people can see it. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That's a 12-week online course that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history, what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, excerpts of interviews I've done with some of the scholars. And then, scroll down and you'll see the information for the class. And then on Sundays, I teach Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. And in that Sunday class, we go through and we look at this history chronologically. The second class is on sale right now, $40 for a very limited time only. And we go through and look at this history chronologically from 1800 through 1968, 1970. And we begin with the Haitian Revolution and the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, because the Haitian Revolution and the Louisiana Purchase, they are related. Okay. France sells about 828,000 square miles of land here in what's known as the United States, because they're fighting against the Haitians and they're going almost bankrupt. Right. So the U.S. in the Louisiana Purchase, it basically doubles the territory of the U.S. with that deal, and increases the need for enslaved African labor to grow crops on the fertile land that is part of the Louisiana Purchase. And we take you through our history chronologically to see what leads up to the Civil War taking place, like the Missouri Compromise of 1820, Texas winning its independence 1836, Mexico winning its independence from Spain 1821, and then Vicente Guerrero, who becomes the second president of Mexico. He's of African descent. He's Afro-Latino. He's a former slave. He abolishes slavery. So we look at what leads to the Civil War taking place, like the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, Mexican-American War 1846-1848, and what's known as the Compromise of 1850. And the U.S. gets California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah, and Nevada, all from Mexico as a result of the Mexican-American War. Then we look at the Reconstruction Era, 1865, 1877, Jim Crow Era, Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, Great Migration, 1915, 1970, World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement. And we highlight Black resistance movements all throughout those periods of times, whether we talk about the Robert Charles riots of 1900, where Robert Charles shoots something like 24 people, kills 2 white police officers, shoots like 7 white police officers, kills 2 of them. Whether we talk about Vicksburg Massacre, 1874, Colfax Massacre, 1873, Louisiana. And then we go through and look at this history to see what brings us to where we are today. Okay. And then we see this political violence. We see this attack on African-American voting rights as well. And we see an attack on us organizing ourselves for economic empowerment as well. And the cooperatives that we had, like the Colored Farmers Union, created about 1886, which grew to about 1.2 million members, things like the Free African Society, 1787. So when you read Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard's book, Collective Courage, and A History of African-American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice, and this is one of the books we reference in the class. So we show you excerpts of the book on the screen. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. We have a deep, rich history involved in economics, entrepreneurship, economic empowerment, and it's the cooperatives where the members are also owners, kind of like a credit union. And these are principles we brought with us from Africa as well. Okay. So your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So we get deep into this in that second class. The first class is fantastic as well. The second class picks up where the first class leaves off. So visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. And then, I showed you, I just want you to show this on the screen. We don't have time to go through it. People can read it. But the article dealing with from the Washington Post dealing with the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871.
Hold on. I think.
Yeah, I just posted the link here in the private chat.
Charged under civil rights law.
Yeah, Trump is charged under civil rights law used to prosecute KKK violence. This is an excellent analysis. And this is, I talked about this on my Sunday night show, and it talks about how it says the statute section 241 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code was originally adopted as part of the Enforcement Act of 1870. It was the first in a series of measures known as the Ku Klux Klan Acts, designed to protect rights guaranteed by the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, collectively called the Reconstruction Amendments. Section 241 makes it a crime to conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person exercising a right protected by the Constitution or federal law. So it's brilliant and it's poetic justice that a white supremacist like Donald Trump is being prosecuted by a Reconstruction era law that was put in place to go after the Ku Klux Klan, who were attacking African-American elected officials, white Republicans, killing us, and trying to keep us from voting, keep us from voting. And this is exactly what Trump was trying to do, trying to suppress the African-American vote and trying to retaliate because we voted and didn't vote for him. So it's poetic justice that he's being charged with the violation of this. And hopefully he's convicted. I think he will be convicted on all 4 charges. I've read a lot of the 45-page indictment. It's a very strong indictment. And if you know anything about federal prosecutions, they have something like a 95%, 96% conviction rate. Okay. And number one. Number two, they don't ever put all of the evidence in an indictment. So there's more evidence that's going to come out in court. This is damaging enough, the indictment. There's more evidence that's going to come out in court that's not in this indictment. Okay, so yeah.
I want to give you a public high five. I want to give you a public certificate.
Okay.
Public acknowledgement. Hear me.
All right.
I'm a proud camel. Everybody knows I went to an undergrad.
You said a camel?
Yeah, ride with me here. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm a proud graduate of Connecticut College, and so we are camels in New London, Connecticut. And I remember taking a U.S. history course, and I think I took 2 semesters of it. So it was like U.S. before 1865, and then the U.S. 1865 to whatever it was. I forgot what the end date was. I literally feel like I have a graduate degree in history as a result of this hour.
Okay.
I really do. I really do. And I will tell you publicly, if you take all the 20 little things that we've talked about, I said this before on the articles that you brought up, and we just did an entire 45 minutes to an hour and a half lecture on that.
Right.
Let me just say I would have done better.
Well, that's what we have to do. We have to, all of this history. That's what we have to do. We have to put it together. We have to make it plain, as Malcolm X said. But if you understand a chronology of history, that's the most important thing to understand. I deal with the years and dates, things like this. But Professor Kabahai Watakamane, he talks about how the most important thing is to understand the chronology of events, not necessarily the year that things took place. You have to understand, but you have to understand the chronology that the year took place and understand cause and effect. And see, this is the most important, one of the most important things, because when you get deeper to this history, then you start seeing, right, why our vote was suppressed, why they continue to suppress our vote. Okay, probably last article I shared with you, this was one I was looking for. This deals with Mississippi. This deals with what's going on right now. I just posted this link here in a private chat. Pull up the actual article. I want people to see this. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is dealing with Section 241 of the Mississippi State Constitution of 1890, and Section 241 is still in place. This is from NBCnews.com. Mississippi cannot strip convicts of right to vote, federal appeals court rules. Okay, because in June of 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court, ruled not to hear a challenge from Mississippi challenging Section 241, because you had, African Americans and others saying that it's unconstitutional to strip someone of their right to vote for life for being convicted of a felony. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote a scathing dissent against the 6-3. It was a 6-3 ruling. Okay, she wrote a scathing dissent against what her conservative colleagues, with them voting not to hear this case, right? So a federal judge just ruled. Now, this article is from August 4th, 2023. Okay, this shows you how all history is a current event, and everything that's ever happened continues to happen in some shape, form, or fashion.
Wow.
A 2-to-1 panel of the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals faulted a provision of Mississippi state constitution that mandates lifetime. This is the second paragraph. That mandates lifetime disenfranchisement for people convicted of a set of crimes, including murder, rape, and theft. And then when you go look here at the 4th paragraph, he said the state's constitution provision, Section 241, served no legitimate purpose, ensures former offenders are never fully rehabilitated, and was adopted in 1890 after the U.S. Civil War to, quote, ensure the political supremacy of the white race, end quote.
Wow.
This is taking place right now. This is showing how the history of the past is shaping the conditions of today, which shapes the trajectory of the future. So when you have the Florida State Legislature, when you have the Florida Department of Education, right, putting limitations on the type of history that can be taught in school. Okay, see, this is the whole goal. This is the whole anti-critical race theory, this fake anti-critical race theory attack. When you can suppress the teaching of the history of the past in schools, and then you can reduce the ability of African Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans to vote in the present to influence the laws of the future, then you can maintain control. And you want to control the federal courts and the U.S. Supreme Court for the next 25, 30 years. This is what all this is about. And it's understanding how history and law and policies all intersect.
I'm overwhelmed.
Yep. Okay. All right, everybody, visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Register for my online history courses. We have my lectures there in digital download format, also DVD lectures. Support us. You can support us through PayPal, Cash App. Also, it's at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com.
I am blessedly overwhelmed. This is always a wealth, in a good way, in a good way.
Right.
You know,
and the connection to our Facebook and YouTube, The African History Network on Facebook, Michael Imhotep on YouTube, Michael Imhotep on Facebook. But our at the top of the page has our social media handles there.
Excellent. So I will say that there are certain people, once they finish high school and they go off to university, there are certain people that go off to trade schools. There are certain people who just go off and they live life. And all three groups of people have a wealth of information to share and to learn, to continue to learn. And so if one feels like, well, maybe they don't feel like, you know, university or the college chair is appropriate for them, they can come to you. And trust and believe, they actually can get more information from you in 3 or 4 hours than some people get in a whole semester.
Oh yeah,
I'm just saying. So I
we have a lot of content.
A lot of content. And I'm very blessed and honored again that you wanted to have this conversation on my show and to further encourage and enlighten people. And so I'm actually just going to repeat as I did at the beginning of the show. I have 3 sort of like content foci. One is called Politician and the People. And usually, again, I speak to elected officials or people who are in legislative, spaces about what's happening and how are we supposed to live in this environment, connected to whoever the you is who sits in a seat to, execute, to legislate. And then the other is called Ministers on a Mission. And so those people who are in spiritual leadership and, tell me what you're doing to enliven and enrich the souls of folk. Let me just say the souls of folk.
Right.
And then the last is a new classes in session. And that is sort of like the other part of what we're doing to think, teach, and learn outside of the box. And so even though initially this was going to be a new classes in session because it's about learning about what's going to be happening next, but thinking and learning outside of the box, it really is connected to politics. And but you're not the politician, but you're speaking about people who are in politics and how that's related to people in everyday life. And so I wanted to thank you for this broadcast. Thank you for this opportunity, this live stream. And live stream is different from podcasts. I'm always going to say that it's different from podcasts because everything that happens in real time happens right here.
Happens in real time. Yep.
And we got to roll with it. It is different.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, sister.
Nothing cut out.
Right.
So peace and blessings to everyone. Brother Michael, hold on for a moment. This is a Learn to Grow You moment where I plant seeds to help you grow. I want everyone to recognize and remember that everyone here has a story, and everyone here their story is going to be important to those people who need to hear it and be inspired by it and be influenced and impacted by it. And so tell your story. And if you don't know how to tell your story, that's why you have me as a wing woman. You can contact me at Learn to Grow You for that further information. And I will be signing off and seeing most people next week. You'll be seeing me sort of doing some lives. I'll be in, let's just say, a different space. And those who follow me know where I'm going to be. And we'll be hearing from some ministers, some global ministers who are siding up against people who are in precarious situations globally and showing how we do the best that we can to support their efforts to live lives better. And so on that note, peace and blessings. I will see you on the next show.
Hold up, everyone. Join me Saturdays, August 12th, August 19th, and August 26th, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for exciting sessions of my 12-week online history course, Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Register at my website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. I'm historian Michael Imhotep, host of the African History Network show, founder of the African History Network, You see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You see me in other media appearances. This is a 12-week online history course that I teach. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We'll look at ancient African civilizations and empires like ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, Nubia, Ta-Nehisi, Ethiopia. We'll look at Carthage and the Punic Wars and Hannibal Barca and fighting against the Romans and the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC. We'll look at the lost cities of Egypt, of Tanis Heracleon and dazzling Aten. We'll look at archaeological discoveries that show an African presence in the Americas dating back at least 51,700 years ago. Did you know that the Washington Monument was actually an ancient African symbol of resurrection that comes from the story of Osar, Auset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus? Did you know that the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon the layout of ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet? We'll also deal with evidence proving that the ancient Egyptians were black Africans. We'll look at films like Black Panther and The Woman King and deal with the African cultural influences that we see represented in these movies, as well as the Queen Cleopatra installment from the Netflix series directed by Jada Pinkett Smith. We'll look at the impact that Christopher Columbus had on the transatlantic slave trade and how Columbus is crucial to understanding the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade, and he helped lay the foundation for slavery, racism, capitalism, and the exploitation of indigenous people. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and register for this 12-week online course. We look at 80 to 100 articles. There's about 7 to 8 books that we reference. We show you the text of the book that we're referencing as well on the screen, so you don't have to buy any of these books if you don't want to. Right now, let's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. This content is PG-13, so you can use it with your children as well. See you in class.